Hi everyone, it's Steffi from the Noveltea Corner. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to the next installment of my Psy-Changeling deep dive. I would suggest that you get yourself a drink and get comfy because I have quite a few notes, like a lot, which is ironic because prior to rereading this book I was not entirely convinced that this was one of my favourites, and now I think it's in my top 3. So I've got a lot to say. So the book in question is Hostage to Pleasure. It is book 5 in the Psy-Changeling series. This is Dorian and Ashia's book. Dorian is a Dark River Sentinel and he is a leopard changeling who cannot shift into his leopard form. And we found that out in previous books. We also know from previous books that Dorian has quite a bit of baggage because in the very first book we found out that his sister was one of the changelings who was murdered by the Psy. So he comes into this story with quite a bit of anger and quite a bit of rage. We also met Ashia Aline, who is an MPsy, which means she has medical capabilities and she really works at a DNA level, so she's primarily a researcher. We met her in book 4. She was the Psy who helped the changelings to rescue the missing kids from the Shine Foundation. It is their story, so I'm really excited to talk about it. Before we begin, I do want to mention a couple of trigger warnings. In this book, we do find out about some things that happened in Ashia's past, including times when she was tortured in her teens, as well as when she experienced medical procedures without consent. So she talks about them. They don't happen on page, but it is something that has happened to her in her past and plays a big part in her character. All right, I'm not going to hold the book up the whole time, but we are going to talk about the book. So just as with the other videos, I'm going to talk about the main plot for this specific book, and then I'm going to talk about the overarching things that happen in the Psy-Changeling world as a whole, and then also some fun bits and pieces at the end. This book opens with Dorian, Clay, another Dark River Sentinel, and Judd fulfilling their end of the bargain that they made with Ashia at the end of book 4. She agreed to help them rescue the Shine kids if they would do a favour for her, and that favour was to kidnap her son from the Psy. The 3 of them are part of the team who rescues Keenan in order to fulfill that deal. Judd is there so that he can help break Keenan's link to the Psy-Net. The idea that they have is that Judd is going to pull Keenan into the Lauren Net, which is his family group since they left the Psy-Net. And when he does sever the link, Keenan doesn't join the Lauren Net. He ends up joining the Dark River group through Dorian because he has unintentionally created a blood bond with Dorian. And as a result, the decision is made to take Keenan to Dark River territory and to stay with Tamsin, the Pack's healer. Because he's formed the link with Dark River, it wouldn't be good to take him into a different territory and have him so far away from people who he's connected to. At this point, Ashia feels that Keenan has left the net, but she doesn't know whether he's been killed or whether he's actually been saved and has dropped out and joined another net. She doesn't know any of this, and she also knows that she shouldn't know this because she shouldn't have this deep bond and connection to her son. As it is, she is currently being punished by Ming, who is one of the Psy counselors in charge of the implant project that Ashia has been forced to work on. He knows that she has issues with being underground for long periods of time. We as readers know that she is claustrophobic. We don't know why, but we know that she has that issue. And because the kids from book 4 disappeared, he is effectively punishing her, and she has not been outside of this underground facility for weeks, and it does affect her mentally. In order to escape the facility, she intentionally poisons herself and is therefore transported to a different facility, and there it has been arranged that someone will help her to escape. And we find out that the person she believes who is helping her is Zai-Zen, who is Keenan's father, and he sends in a teleporter to get her away from the Psy and into Dark River territory. Alongside all of this, we are introduced to a new character, Amara. We know that Amara has a connection to Keenan and Ashia, but we don't know the extent of it yet. And we also know that Amara is just a little bit different. She thinks about things in a very different way. After Ashia's escape, Ming meets with one of the Arrows, Vasek, who we find out is a natural born teleporter. And Vasek is actually the person who got Ashia away from the Psy. This is the first scene where we find out that perhaps Ming doesn't have as good control over the Arrows as he believes, because Vasek doesn't mention his involvement, doesn't mention where Ashia is. He stays silent on that point and appears to be a good soldier as far as Ming is concerned. It's also confirmed that not only was Zai-Zen helping Ashia to escape, but Anthony Kyriakis, Faith's father, is also involved in helping get her out of Ming's control. When she lands in Dark River territory, she's left on her own, and Ashaya is attacked by a pack of wild lynx, and Dorian ends up rescuing her, but she's injured, and so he takes her to Mercy in order to get her wounds seen to. Mercy is another Dark River sentinel, the only female sentinel in the pack, and where Dorian is quite cold towards Ashaya initially because he has a lot of leftover rage towards the Psy for his sister's death, Mercy is actually quite open-minded about the whole thing, and in this scene we find out that Dorian and Mercy are really quite good friends. The way they talk to each other, they're almost sibling-like in the way that they relate to one another. Amara is revealed to be Ashaya's twin sister, and she's also sociopathic. Being an MPSI, Amara is also involved in medical research, and Ming goes to her when Ashaya has disappeared in order to recruit Amara for the implant project because he believes that she'll be able to finish her sister's work. It's revealed that Ashaya and Amara have a really strong bond. They have always been able to sense each other and get into each other's heads. However, Ashaya is actively blocking Amara because she believes Amara to be quite dangerous. We also learn just how important passing genes on to progeny is to the Psy, and this was used against Ashaya when she was first asked to be involved in the implant project because she turned the Psy Council down, and Ming had her kidnapped and subjected to medical treatment. This is where the trigger warning comes in. Basically, she had her fallopian tubes tied so that she wouldn't be able to have children if she refused to commit to the project. So she was working under two sets of duress because then her child was kidnapped as well. Ashaya and Dorian end up spending a lot of time together, and eventually Dorian reveals that he actually can't shift into a leopard, and this really piques Ashaya's interest, and the researcher in her wants to know why this is the case. And so she spends quite a bit of time thinking about this project throughout the story. She actually finds out quite early on, and this is always just something that she comes back to thinking about. Dorian is really frustrated with Ashaya because she spends a lot of time refusing to see Keenan, claiming that it's safer for him if she doesn't see him. However, we discover that she is not quite so distant as she would have everyone believe. She has a great deal of affection and loyalty towards Keenan. She wants him to be safe, and Dorian begins to see this just in the way that she talks about her son. Having escaped the Psy, Ashaya decides to broadcast information about the implant project. She wants it to stop. If you haven't seen any of the other videos, the implant is designed to create a hive mind in the Psynet, placing many Psy under the control of one or two individuals. She's been actively sabotaging the project, but she also wants to make the project known to everyone so that there will be public support for stopping the project. And so she utilizes the Changelings communications network, the CTX, in order to get her message out. Obviously the Psy aren't happy with this, they try to shut everything down, but there were a few guerrilla organizations that managed to record her broadcast and then keep pushing out that information, which obviously causes a great deal of issues with the Psy Council, who then begin to talk about whether or not they should kill her and have her taken out of the equation. Ashaya's true loyalty to her son is revealed when Keenan has an issue, and Ashaya ends up having to go and save him. She ends up revealing a lot more about herself to Dorian, including the fact that she's claustrophobic, and that the reason that she is claustrophobic is because as a child she was buried in an earthquake and she never quite recovered from it, and her silence has cracks in it because of that. And instead of trying to force her daughter into reconditioning, Ashaya's mother actually basically told her to fake it rather than force her into reconditioning. Dorian begins to pick at the reasons why Ashaya is so afraid of her sister, and then it is revealed that when she was 17, Amara buried Ashaya in the ground in a coffin and treated it like an experiment. In that period, Ashaya's silence completely fractured, and that ever since then she's been faking it. And she has worked really hard at not feeling things because she believes that whenever she has strong emotional feelings, her sister becomes more mentally unstable, because Amara is constantly trying to live through her sister because she doesn't feel those things herself. It's around this time that Dorian begins to realize that Ashaya is his mate, but he doesn't tell her yet, mostly because he's still working through his own issues and he can't believe that his mate is actually a Psy. The next reveal is that Keenan is not Ashaya's biological son, he's actually Amara's son. However, Ashaya has raised him from birth, and Keenan is well aware of this. He treats Ashaya as his mother, but he knows that Amara gave birth to him. Amara's entire pregnancy occurred because she was trying to create an experiment on a fetus, and she had every intention of killing Keenan as soon as he was born, but Ashaya convinced her not to. And so Ashaya has constantly been running up against a clock because she always knew she had to get Keenan out of the Psynet and away from Amara. When Dorian and Ashaya have sex for the first time, it's sexy as all hell. They are a really great combination together. They really play off each other because they're both very strong personalities. Dorian is a very dominant alpha male character, but he's also not an asshole. And Ashaya is very well aware of her own capabilities. She is a very strong woman. I mean, she has to be. She's gone through a whole lot and survived a whole lot. She has made the decision that she's very intrigued by Dorian and she likes him, so she's willing to play with him, which I think was a really nice dynamic. I think she is the strongest of the Psy women in the stories that we've had so far in terms of the way that she stands up to Dorian constantly. Not to say that the others aren't really strong female characters, but this is in a completely different way. They're actually quite evenly matched in terms of power dynamics for relationships, I felt, in this book, which I think made the whole thing a much nicer reading experience than something, say, like Visions of Heat, where there was a really big power imbalance between Vaughn and Faith. And I am talking about that in terms of initial relationships. Sasha and Lucas have a very strong, very even power dynamic now as we get further into the books because they've spent more time with each other. But for initial relationship and initial contact, these two really do complement each other quite well. Amara eventually escapes from Ming with the intention of finding her sister. She's really unhappy that Ashaya has left her behind. She believes that she owns Ashaya and she doesn't want to share her with anyone, including a changeling, and so she seeks her out. Dorian and Ashaya eventually capture Amara safely and they hold her in Dark River territory for her own safety. And when Sasha tries to work with Amara, she finds it a really disturbing experience because Amara has no empathy whatsoever. She's just very blank and very unnerving, particularly for an empath. And I thought that was a really interesting dynamic because you have these these twins who are complete opposites. I think Amara is a really fascinating character. She sort of pops up here or there later in the series as well. And just the way that she approaches things is fascinating to me. From Ashaya, in order to solidify a lot of things that Ashaya said the first time around. And while they're there, they're attacked by the Psy. Dorian ends up being fatally shot. It's at this point that Ashaya accepts the mating bond in an effort to try and save Dorian. As it turns out, Faith had a vision about this attack, and so people had been alerted. For the seconds that Ashaya manages to hold on to Dorian, it gives time for a field surgeon from the Arrows to arrive and to stabilize Dorian enough until the paramedics arrive. So there's this whole big, very chaotic scene, which is actually really well written. And you get to see the depth of the connections between all of these people and an introduction to a lot of characters who we get to know in more depth in later books. Over time, both Ashaya and Dorian heal, and then the decision must be made with what to do with Amara, because when Ashaya dropped out of the Psy net upon accepting the mating bond, Amara followed her. No one really trusts Amara, and then Amara's suggestion is that Ashaya is essentially the leash on Amara, so she can control and contain Amara psychically, and Amara is willing to accept that in order to stay closer to where her sister is. And then the changelings actually put Amara to work in one of their research facilities because she is a very intelligent, very good researcher, so they actually utilize her skills while keeping an eye on her. And at the very end, Ashaya and Keenan move in with Dorian, and Ashaya continues to work on a potential cure for Dorian's inability to shift, and her first couple of experiments and treatments don't really go so well, and Dorian has convinced himself that it's okay, has told her that it's okay that they haven't worked, and then right at the very end, about 6 months after they start trying different things, Dorian is able to shift for the first time, which was a really lovely scene at the end of the book. So that's the main story arc, which is massive. I actually cannot believe how much happened in the book, and to be honest, I didn't talk about everything because there is so much. In terms of overarching world plots, we are introduced to a lot of characters who pop up in later books. We obviously find out about Zai-Zen, who is Keenan's father and who is someone that Ashaya has a lot of respect for because he has worked with his son's entire life to keep him safe from Amara and to train him up so that he is capable and he's aware of what his abilities are. We finally get a name to the teleporter who's been popping in and out of stories, that is Vasek. So he's the natural born teleporter, or TKV, and we get his full story in Shield of Winter, which is later on in the series. We get our first proper introduction to Silver Mercant, who is Caleb Krychek's assistant, and she belongs to a very prominent Psy family of spies. and they are very well respected. We find out a couple of side things about Mercy, the Dark River Sentinel, because her book is the next book. We find out that her name is actually Melisandre. We know that she attended medical school in the past, but she didn't stick it out, and also that she won Miss Bikini Babe 2067, and you actually find out that story in the next book. We find out that Dorian's parents are still alive. We don't actually meet them in the book, but they are still alive, which is rare in the first 5 books because most of the heroes particularly either don't have their parents or have only one of them, but he has both. We also find out a little bit more about the rat changelings. Tejan, who is the alpha of the rats, is assisting in part of the story, and at that time he's actually babysitting the youngest of the rat changelings, Annika, who is said to be the first born rat changeling in a decade. We find out that Caleb is searching for someone in the Psy-Net and he hasn't found her yet, and it's something that is consuming him. He's desperate to find this person. We also find out that Henry Scott, who is one of the leaders of the Psy Council, joins Pure Psy, which is a group of fanatical Psy who want to see silence maintained. And we also see the first signs that Henry and his wife, which is more wife in name rather than wife in reality, are actually having troubles. There's quite a bit of dissent in their relationship when previously they've presented a very coordinated front. And then my fun things for the book were, I just adored Dorian and Mercy's relationship. It just made me so happy. I said earlier that they're very sibling-like in the way that they interact with each other, and I stand by that. It was very cute towards the end when he's recovering in hospital and he's really concerned that Mercy is going to be mad at him because he's found his mate. And there was never any attraction like that between the two of them, but he was very concerned about that, and I thought that was really sweet. And I also really liked how Dorian has become quite good friends with Riley and Andrew Kincaid, who are 2 of the Snowdancer lieutenants. Just like Dorian, their sister was taken by the crazy Psy in the first book. However, Brenna survived. We've obviously talked about her in Caressed by Ice. But he's forged this connection with the 2 brothers as brothers, and so he also checks in on Brenna from time to time as well. And he's also formed a relationship with Judd as well, which I think is really cool. So that is my spoilery discussion of Hostage to Pleasure. I really enjoyed reading it. Like I said, there was so much that happened in this book that I completely forgotten about that happened. Like, this stuff everywhere that happened in this book. So it was really great to come back and reread it because this was not one I'd reread before, and now it'll be one of the ones that go back into my rotation as books to pick up when I want to read a book that I know I really enjoy. In the comments below, let me know if you have read Hostage to Pleasure. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. I hope that wherever you are in the world you are staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye everyone.